The response to Golden Wildfire has been mixed, to say the least. I don't have the time to dissect everything that's already been said about the route, though, because I have 2 other routes to play, and because I'm trying to keep this video around the 10-minute mark. Even after I spoiled myself on the leaks, I was determined to go into Golden Wildfire with an open mind, because I'm well aware that one of the biggest problems with knowing how a story ends before you go through the whole thing is that you miss out on all the context of that ending. I actually changed around my planned route order in part because of the strong negative reaction I've been seeing towards Golden Wildfire's ending, along with another consideration that I won't be able to go into fully until I've finished one other route at least. So, how does Claude's route hold up when put in context? It's not a total improvement, honestly. Golden Wildfire invites immediate comparisons to Three Houses' Crimson Flower, but the similarities extend beyond Rhea as the final boss, as the 2 routes share several fundamental writing issues. The preoccupation with self-insert romance and the tone problems that come with that are thankfully absent here, and in Three Hopes in general, but the same cannot be said for the pacing and lack of focus, especially when it comes to developing antagonists. To break it down by numbers, Crimson Flower crams 4 antagonists into just 6 chapters, which contributes heavily to its breakneck pacing and overall scattered feel. Claude's the target in the route's first third, but Rhea's the final boss, but the Agarthans are the postgame but still get a chapter to themselves, and meanwhile Dimitri's over here being a tragic gay roadblock. Golden Wildfire has twice as many chapters, but it's still packing 5 separate antagonists. And that's not counting Geralt's mercenaries as their own entity, or the optional interlude with Arval, which I did unlock, but won't be talking about until the 3rd overview video because it applies to all routes. That lack of focus hurts a bit too, because when talking about the demo, I praise Golden Wildfire for doing the most of the 3 prologues to establish a number of interesting potential conflicts for its characters, and distinguish itself from its predecessor route in Three Houses. But it turns out that in doing so, Golden Wildfire attempts to take on all of those conflicts, and so has very little time to develop most of them individually. Most conspicuously is that Lester stages an invasion, but is abruptly forced to retreat to turn its attention to another threat, not once, but twice. As a plot twist, that works fine enough once, but any more than that and it starts to feel like cheap writing, particularly because the second time it happens is utterly random. The Agarthans begin attacking Ordelia territory, forcing Claude to pull out of his invasion of the kingdom, and while when I first played this I thought this would be building to a fight in Shambhala as a throwback to Verdun Wind's late game, nope, there's no Shambhala and 0 explanation for why the Agarthans are even attacking here, and after a single chapter it's right back to fighting the kingdom and the church. At best, I see this as a way for Golden Wildfire to introduce the Agarthans to the story in order to better set up the Arval interlude if you unlocked it, but if so, it's painfully transparent. Not to mention how it ignores the elephant in the room that is the Agarthans' main goal, which happens to be the same as Claude's. That brings me to Rhea, the already controversial final boss of Golden Wildfire. As I said, context doesn't help all that much here. I am not kidding when I say that Rhea appears in all of 2 cutscenes prior to the second-to-last regular story battle, once when you choose your house, and then here where she's thanking Dimitri for accepting refugees from the church. This route has no interest in developing Rhea as an antagonist, or establishing the Central Church as an obstacle to Claude and Edelgard's internal reforms, or even as a serious military threat, considering you face them in all of 1 story battle prior to Endgame. It all gets hand-waved by a letter Edelgard writes to Claude, and even then Claude remains skeptical, but still runs with the assumption that killing Rhea will be the fastest way to end the war. In this respect, Golden Wildfire is even worse than Crimson Flower, because at least that route follows 12 chapters of white clouds building up Rhea as suspicious and potentially threatening. From a writing perspective, Golden Wildfire leans hard on confirmation bias. If you played Three Houses and came away believing that the church is evil, then no more explanation is necessary. If you came away from that game believing that Edelgard is persecuting the few remaining Nabateans to justify her own conquest, then this scene near the end takes on a tragic new light, and Claude comes off as an idiot for blindly believing Edelgard, or, perhaps worse, an opportunist willing to kill a woman and her supporters just because he thinks that it'll put Lester in a better position in the long run. Who knows what you're supposed to think if you didn't play Three Houses? I guess you're meant to go with the familiar JRPG trope of churches being evil and just never question it. Not questioning things doesn't sound like a very Claude thing to do, and now we're getting more to the heart of what's really off about this route. Three Houses establishes early on that Claude is the leader most curious about discovering the secrets of Fodlan, and while Dimitri is coping badly with his personal demons and Edelgard is crushing on her teacher, it's Claude who's the most directly invested in the mystery plot of White Clouds. That doesn't carry over into the plot of Verdant Wind, because it's copied from Silver Snow, but it does carry over thematically in that Verdant Wind contains Three Houses' biggest world-building reveals. These are mostly contained in lengthy exposition dumps near the end of the game, and while that's not what I would call good writing, it's nonetheless a clearer picture of the setting than what we get from the other three routes. That's not the case at all in Golden Wildfire, where Claude learns nothing about Rhea prior to the final battle and is even surprised when she turns into the Immaculate One. Funny that Edelgard didn't mention that in her big letter, but as Three Hopes has her and Claude looking to screw each other over at almost any opportunity, it's possible that that was intentional. I won't be able to say more about these routes' shared continuity until I play the other two, but I suspect that may in part explain Golden Wildfire's all-around unsatisfying ending. As for Claude, the route steers away from his curiosity and lands instead on ambition as his primary character trait. Ambition that's sometimes paired with unscrupulous methods. This is not inconsistent with his character in Three Houses, and it's a bit more palatable when his supporters call him out on his callousness. He gets a real dressing down when he allows one of his new Imperial allies to die to give his forces a chance to surround the enemy, and the game underlines this by using Randolph and his vengeful sister Fleisch in this role, the same pair that Azure Moon uses to illustrate how far Dimitri has fallen. The problem is that, unlike with Dimitri, the lesson doesn't seem to stick, because even when he comes to Edelgard's rescue, Claude's mostly interested in getting her in his debt, and also that whole thing about killing Rhea, even though he has doubts that it'll end the war, and anyone who's played Three Houses will know that neutralizing Rhea won't stop the Empire from wanting to conquer all of Fodlan. There might be a character arc in here somewhere, but as was also the case in Three Houses, it's obscured beneath everything Claude hides from the other characters and from the player. He suggests to Lawrence that a king chosen by the people might be a good thing, but he's also got another hereditary crown waiting for him back in Elmira, and he never talks about that. Shez figures it out, and Claude tells Judith in a paralogue, but aside from that, we still have no idea about how Claude being an Elmiran prince affects his political motivations. If you want to be really uncharitable, you could suggest that Claude and his brother aren't so different after all, that both of them are looking to exploit Fodlan for their own gain, and that Claude succeeds where Shahid fails because he's the favorite in Elmira and he had the good fortune to also be the heir to an Alliance dukedom. This is a good example of why I say that it's a mistake to look to Fire Emblem for relevant political commentary when it's just fantasy autocrats being fantasy autocrats. But it's also much harder to enjoy Claude as a character when there's so much about him that never gets explored. I don't hate Golden Wildfire, and I do think there are parts of it that work. This is mostly true of Part 1, that is, Chapters 4 through 8, because there's a clear back and forth between the Alliance and the Empire, and even though Shahid drops in unexpectedly for the finale, I can still buy that twist as a result of Holst leaving the border undefended to fight in Claude's army. The sequence after the second time skip, where Claude forms the Leicester Federation, tracks with his earlier frustrations with the Alliance Roundtable, and I can even accept his truce with Edelgard from a strategic standpoint. Claude knows his fledgling federation lacks the internal stability and military might to take on the Empire alone, and Edelgard doesn't have a means to worm her way into Leicester anymore without a pro-Imperial faction in their discarded Roundtable system. It's after that things start to go downhill, with character development that comes and goes, the utterly pointless Agarthan interruption, and the total lack of critical examination on Claude's part combined with the refusal to engage with Rhea as a character in any sense. No wonder Golden Wildfire ends on such a dour cliffhanger. And unlike with Crimson Flower, which is my second favorite Three Houses route, I'm not seeing much that's likely to elevate it over the other two routes of Three Hopes in my estimation. No one here can match the delightful evil of Hubert, and there's no beating these two for beautifully gay death scenes. Oh well, one of them was always going to come in third place. Thanks for watching, and be sure to like the video if you enjoyed it. If you played Golden Wildfire, how do you feel about the route? I know that's a very open-ended question with the potential for many strongly worded answers, but it can be good to vent, and hopefully I provided a little extra food for thought on the matter. If you're not subscribed to me, go ahead and do that as well, because next weekend I'll be back with my overview of Scarlet Blaze, which I promise to not make entirely about Hubert and Ferdinand. I will be tempted though. Au revoir.